more sessions to make your goals live and support your goals, your networking opportunities. So I'm so excited and hope that you can join in next month as well. And now I would like to ask Lindsey Williams to start moderating our panel discussion.
Hi, thank you. Welcome everyone to the AI and Machine Learning, Where is the Gap in Health Tech panel discussion at the HealthTech RapidConf May event hosted by the HealthTech Networking Club. I'm Lindsey Williams, founder of Corylus Consulting and co-founder of MyUTI, and will be your moderator for this panel discussion. The monthly HealthTech RapidConf events are organized by the HealthTech Networking Club, an exclusive networking club that brings together influential members of the health tech community. Our Rapid Conference videos boast 10,000 video views on both YouTube and Facebook. So if you'd like more information on the monthly HealthTech Rapid Conference event series or the HealthTech Networking Club, please head to the Bene Studio website. To all our members, if you haven't already, we urge you to leave a comment in the general Slack space about our topic of the month for the chance to contribute to the HealthTech Guide. More details are available in Slack. The link to the Slack channel can be found in the Zoom chat box, so please leave any feedback or comments on the panel discussion in the general chat on Slack. Before we begin our panel introductions, I'd like to remind our panelists to please mute all devices, including Slack notifications, for the duration of the session. Now, I will ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Dr. Joann Elmore, will you please introduce yourself to this group?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm an internist and I'm an epidemiologist. Now that we have a pandemic, you all know what an epidemiologist is. I'm a professor of medicine at the School of Medicine at UCLA and a professor of health policy and management, also at UCLA. I have been studying diagnostic accuracy of medical imaging for many years, but I'm a bit of a generalist. I also study open notes, transparency of medical records and communicating with patients. And now I'm studying AI. I like working with big data and have even studied things such as the fact that COVID may have been in the Los Angeles area as early as December 2019. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Definitely want to hear more about your work. Dr. Chang, can we go to you next, please?
Yes, I'm a practicing pediatric cardiologist with a pretty busy practice. And I have a data science background. I realized about 10, 11 years ago that data science took a new trajectory. So I went back to school and have myself updated from my biostatistical background. I head up the MI3 Institute that we talked about earlier this morning. So I'm responsible for AI-related projects in the hospital and in our health system. And I also do a lot of things nationally and internationally that relate to AI adoption for healthcare.
Wonderful. And Dr. Chin?
Sorry, I forgot to mute myself. Hi, this is Lynda Chin. My background's a dermatologist and I spent almost 20 years in academia. My area of focus has been in cancer genomics. From data generation, development and technology to development analytic and then data pipeline. And that really ultimately led me to becoming increasingly interested in data, not just electronic and research, EMR data or research data, but also real world data. And about, my last transition was to start a company, which I described briefly to you, Apricity Health, where we are really looking at how technology infrastructure can facilitate really establishing a integrated ecosystem, I guess mini ecosystem that allow us to transition from care to research to drug discovery and development and clinical trial back to adoptions in standard care in a more seamless fashion to accelerate that process and then create that learning system. And one component of that system is the digital care, where I talk about how we can create a hybrid delivery system that can facilitate convenient patient-centered care home in between visit while creating and maintaining that continuity to their specialists, which is the oncologist. and drive the adoptions of novel therapy in that whole space more broadly. And in fact, one of our major focus using the system is to address inequity in access to specialty care. And this is going to be a project we'll be launching in partnership with the Stand Up to Cancer, which hopefully we'll be announcing in the next week or two in terms of how we leverage technology, integrating into workflow, and focusing on delivery of care service, not technology. Where technology is merely an enablement, but delivering the service targeting to bridge the gaps in equity of access.
Balint, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Balint Bene, CEO of Bene Studio. And during the previous 10 plus years, I've seen more than 100 digital projects. And as our main focus is health technology, I would like to bring this technology experience into this discussion today. And this technology aspect includes the user experience, the design, the architecture, the security aspects as well, and the software development aspects too.
Thank you guys so much. So as everybody can see, we have a pretty phenomenal panel here today. AI and machine learning is such a big topic, and there's so many things ensconced inside of what we could discuss, but really we boiled these most pertinent conversations through our previous conversations and also from questions that came through the Slack channel into kind of three large buckets. And so the first is really, how do we define AI in healthcare? And I think it's really interesting to understand that there are multiple perspectives to take on this. And I'd actually really like to start with Dr. Elmore, your perspective, because when we first spoke on the phone, I was actually a bit surprised that you came into the conversation saying, I have a skeptic's perspective. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about your perspective?
Certainly. As I mentioned, I'm an internist. I see patients in the clinic, and I'm used to the benefits of computer support tools. They read the EKGs for me. They interpret pap smears. And for many years, I have studied diagnostic accuracy of cancer screening and cancer diagnoses. I get a lot of the ideas for my research from my encounters with patients. And patients sometimes ask very good questions. I had a patient about 15 years ago who asked me why she was getting charged extra money to pay for this computer-aided detection tool on her screening mammogram. And I was volunteering at that time at a county hospital, so that extra, $50, $60 was a lot of money to this woman at the time. And I thought it was a good question. We were early in the development of computer-aided detection tools. They're not as powerful as the new AI tools, but I thought it was a good question. I had data. I had more than 400,000 mammograms that had been interpreted, some with the computer-aided tools and some without. And I was able to compare the accuracy, thinking, let's see how much benefit we're getting from that computer-aided detection on the mammograms themselves. We were surprised by the findings. We published in New England Journal of Medicine, and we basically found that when the computer-aided detection tool was added, the accuracy was lower than when the mammograms were interpreted without. Now, this wasn't what we had hoped to find, and we were surprised. And I have two hypotheses. The first is that these computer tools, they give us little arrows and they point to areas of concern. And, radiologists, we care, they don't want to miss things, and it increased the false positive rate. They were calling back more and more women for additional testing. Then secondly, human nature, maybe physicians are getting falsely reassured, thinking the computer will back them up. And, we noted that some of the radiologists were missing lesions that were subtle, but perhaps they would have identified without the benefit of that computer-aided tool. Now, I was very naive at this time. I thought we were going to put a break in the use of this technology in medicine. If it's not helping and you're paying for it, won't that create a change? And At that point, the computer-aided detection tools were in about 30% of all mammograms in the US. Medicare had just approved funding for them. And you all know, you guys are venture capitalists, it took off. Despite our publication very clearly showing a drop in accuracy. And now more than 95% of all screening mammograms in the US have computer-aided detection. There have been follow-up studies showing that the accuracy is lower. And some have estimated that we're spending more than almost a $500 million a year on this computer-aided detection tool that isn't helping and may indeed be hurting. And given this background scientifically and clinically, I wonder, I know AI tools are coming. You know, we now have a much greater depth of image data that's even more complex. And I hope that the AI tools can help us. But I worry that we may have similar problems ahead. The bar to get FDA approval for some of the new technology is fairly low, you know, small cohorts, small number of patients, small number of providers. And when you throw these tools out into the crazy clinical world, you may get different results. And so as Lindsey said, I'm a bit of a skeptic.
I think that's such an important perspective to bring to the table. And I know, Dr. Chang, you mentioned to me the other day, just this sizable schism between the developers and the field of practice and how you're working to kind of bridge that gap or act as an intermediary. Can you please share with the group a little bit about that?
Sure. Maybe just to balance Joann, I'm sort of a cautious optimist. And I just noted, Joann, your publication came out in 2011. So lots have happened, as you know, in the AI world since 2011. I think 2011 is even pre-deep learning for medical images. So, but I am a cautious optimist, to be frank. So I think the major problem isn't the capability of some of the tools, some of the task-oriented AI tools we have. I think the major issue by far is this divide between the AI tool developers and the clinicians on the front lines. I see both worlds, so I can see the size of that schism probably more than most people on either side. I think there was a recent study that Joann, you might know about, which is out of some 300 studies looking at models to look at CTs and chest x-rays during COVID, none of them were generalized to a hospital setting. So that's, I think, a really, really important wake-up call for us. And I spend most of my time trying to narrow that gap as best as I can. And I think the fault is that, first of all, you know, a decade ago, around the time of your editorial or your publication, AI experts were publishing in AI in medicine, oftentimes without a clinician, even among the authors. So that tells me there was a total lack of collaboration. I think we're about a third away where I'd like to see it now. I think most papers now have doctors involved and even doctors heading those papers. So that's encouraging. So I think even though there's been a good improvement on the tools that are available, basically these tools can learn on their own versus CAD, which wasn't really able to a large extent. So the technology is improved, but we still have this schism between the adoption as well as the evolution of these tools. I'm a Formula One fan, and it's kind of like the engineers are thinking they can be drivers on the track. So we need to stick to what we do best. The data scientists need to stick to the tools, but they need to communicate continually with the clinicians on the ground.
That's such an excellent point. And Dr. Chin, I think this flows perfectly into what we talked about on the phone just the other day. Do you want to pipe in a little?
Yes. I guess I'm sort of, I think, Anthony, you sort of set it up for the right lead in for my point, which I would put myself in between the two of them. I agree. I think the Formula One example is so great because we wouldn't want our engineer to drive that fast car. And just like we wouldn't want the data scientists to take care of patients. And I think that's where one of the biggest challenge comes in, this misconceptions of what AI is supposed to be and what it's supposed to do. I think back 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I was in genomic and we learned how to do sequencing, we learned how to analyze, and we get deeper and deeper into the genome. And at some point, at the beginning of the Cancer Genome Atlas, there are like 4 hands that went up who actually study cancer biology. And then at some point, we have genomic scientists thinking that what they publish in Cell Science Nature paper can go to the clinic directly. And that's just not how, medicine is not the same as science. So coming back to this point, I think AI is in that phase of maturation where the tool developer, the engineers have to come to understand that that piece of technology is only one component and it has to fit into a much larger picture, while the physicians are the ones that are trained and needed to incorporate that into everyday practice at point of care. So I like to, consider, if we can just consider AI as augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, and really think of it as a tool that enable and augment the practicing physician, so that the data scientists, the AI engineers, behind the scenes, and what the tool need to come from that frontline provider who understand, the decision they have to make. There are many examples that speak to that. Maybe, I would have a chance to, I'm going to share this one example that really tells the story, which is in a AI big data conference, someone talking about the need to develop a diaper that can report the fact that the patient is having diarrhea. And I know technology can probably do something like this, except having been a physician, even though I'm not practicing anymore, unlike Joann and Anthony, I'm pretty sure patient knows that they're having diarrhea. I'm not sure developing a technology to detect diarrhea really is the unmet need we have in medicine.
Yeah, that's interesting innovation.
Lindsey, I just want to add that, in figure skating, you get a technical score and an artistry score. I think I've been pushing, and I know Lynda would, and Joann would even also agree, we need a technical score for the data science. We also need a score for the clinical relevance. Yeah, so, you can do great data science, but if it has zero or impact or irrelevant for patients, then that's still no impact overall. So.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Chin, you said it best, that it's not artificial intelligence, it should be augmented intelligence. And I think that was a really great way to leverage the fact that physicians still need to be involved, which honestly takes us kind of right into that second topic. And Balint, before we move on to that, I quickly do want to touch on, from a technical perspective, this concept of building good tools that are actually useful and what people can think of from that, right, design part of it. And then we'll move into our second topic, which is really patient care, right? How AI impacts patient care.
Yeah, so I totally agree with the main point today, that collaboration is key between the different players, because artificial intelligence is such a wide topic and such a new topic. So it can be successful only if the physicians and the technologists collaborate and communicate really deeply to reach their goals. And I would say I'm a realist, so not an optimist, not a pessimist, because I see AI as a tool, and what I can see on the market is both overhype, like AI can solve everything, and fear could be problematic, because we should educate the users how to use properly these tools, because these are just tools, and we shouldn't expect too much from them, but we shouldn't avoid them as well, because it could be a great help for the physicians. And from my point of view, the most important goal of the new technologies is to support the doctors to be more effective, to have more time focusing on the real human interactions, and to save time on administration and unnecessary steps, because one of the biggest problem in healthcare nowadays is not the technology but the resource limits of doctors and their overwork. So this is what we should address. And under AI, there are a few fields where we can see a lot of improvements, like machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, and the natural language processing. And these fields can be used for different goals, different purposes. And we can see that this field is booming. So just in the first quarter, around $1 billion of investment is happened in this field. So we shouldn't avoid this trend, but we should drive it to have the collaboration between doctors and the technology people, and to help primarily the doctors to make a better work.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point going into understanding the role of AI in patient care, because ultimately the role of AI in patient care, from what I hear you say, may be allowing a physician to spend more time with the patient and less time on other administrative-based tasks that are actually taking time from that face-to-face or relationship-based scenario. And Dr. Chin, you had, I think, a really great way to say this, right? Like, patient care is not an engineering problem, and computers don't treat patients. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your thoughts around the role of AI in patient care in that regard.
I think, I'm open, in terms of being an optimist. I'm open to possibility that in the future, computer and technology can do a lot more. But I would say now and in the foreseeable future, I think the role of, I think the machine can only be, at the moment, as good as what we understand the biology to be. And at some point, that may not be the case, but that's where we are. So what we know of today and what we can train our program or develop our program, computer program or technology to do, really should be focusing on helping a clinician do a better job, because there is a lot of places technology like that can really help improve care. But the main point is, this is not solving an engineering problem. I think any one of you who have ever seen a doctor for an illness or have a family who have done that know that there are many other things going on, that lead to a certain decision and choices, whether it's from the patient side or from the clinician side. And then there's a lot of decision that's being made in medicine that is inherently decision made based on incomplete information. And I think that's where approaching it as a straightforward engineering problem get you I guess what Anthony said, right? A technical thing. Yeah, technically you can define this problem and here's a requirement to solve it, and you can build a tool to do it. But the reality is that the art of medicine is about how far can you bend that rule without breaking it. And we don't really know. And that's where experience comes in, and the art of medicine eventually will turn into science. And until then, I don't think we can really replace that human judgment and intuition that comes from taking in a lot of parameter in. So that's sort of the way I look at it. We have to take care of patient as a person, and it's not an engineering solution. And at the end of the day, no computer and no insight actually can treat the patient. We need that human to deliver the care for the patients.
Dr. Elmore, I see you nodding. You obviously find agreement there. And I believe you actually had some interesting points along this road as well, just in terms of understanding kind of the history with AI and the patient right patient care, and some publications also?
Well, I can describe an area where AI can be very powerful and very helpful in medicine, and where it is definitely needed. And in fact, I'm a realist. I'm not a skeptic. So let's like change your label for me, please. Lindsey set us up to start that way. And so let me share a personal story. For many years, I studied accuracy of breast cancer screening, mammograms, radiology, and my outcome was scientifically, do they have breast cancer? Yes or no, binary outcome. Then I happened to find out from a personal experience that pathology diagnosis may not be accurate. I had a skin biopsy and I had an initial diagnosis and was told it was invasive melanoma. I did what most of you would do. I got a second opinion, and the second opinion said it was just a benign atypical nevus, nothing, it wasn't invasive melanoma. So I had two very different diagnoses on the same exact skin biopsy. So I sent the material to a third really experienced person who's written the textbooks. And the third person said it's in between, it's called a Spitz lesion, it's not invasive melanoma. And I went with that diagnosis because I didn't want to have the label of invasive melanoma. And I'm now more than a decade later, no problems with melanoma. And so I think that was the correct diagnosis. But this was one of my aha moments where I realized that diagnosis of cancer, yes, no, but also those important pre-invasive lesions that put people at risk, and we give them labels and we do more follow-up testing if they have these high-risk lesions, there may be a lot of variability. And I realized I wanted to study this, even though I'd never worked in pathology. And I definitely knew I needed to work in this area when I read a scientific article in PLOS One, where some fun and brilliant scientists had taught pigeons to interpret pathology and mammograms, and they had done quite well. Pigeons, they would give them food pellets, and the pigeons would accurately detect cancer versus no cancer. And this was published. And I thought, well, let me document how we're doing now. And so I did one study of breast pathologists, hundreds of them involved, took many years to gather the data. And basically, we found that there's a lot of variability. Lynda mentioned the important art of medicine. We do have criteria that pathologists follow, the visual assessment and guidelines, but there is a bit of subjective nature. It's not as bad as looking at a Rorschach ink blot test, but for example, a diagnosis of ductal carcinoma in situ, a pre-invasive breast cancer lesion that probably 20,000 women a year are having mastectomies for, we found that about 1 in 5 of those diagnoses may be wrong. We also studied melanoma and diagnoses of skin biopsies and found that there was even more variability. And this is actively practicing pathologists in the US that are interpreting these. We found that a diagnosis of melanoma in situ and thin invasive melanomas, less than 50% agreement. And we even studied, if you take one pathologist and they interpret something and call it invasive melanoma, if you give them that same exact case a year later, are they reproducible? And the answer is no, probably less than half the time. They'll give you a different diagnosis. And at least AI will be more reproducible. And so with this background and documenting as an epidemiologist this amount of variability, I realized the need and the potential for AI. And so I'm now collaborating with computer scientists, and I have funding from NIH, Department of Defense, Melanoma Research Alliance. And we're seeing how well these tools can do in helping to improve the classification and serve as a tool. But I still wonder what's going to happen when they're approved by FDA and then they get into the big practice and have this human AI sort of connection. So that's my story, Lindsey.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I think it's a good one there to share. And Dr. Chang, I mean, I think one of the things that really started this negative, I don't want to say approach, but I mean, really some of the early forecasts of AI were incorrect, and that it was positioning to replace physicians. And I think you made a really good point of saying that's not accurate. And really the need is for conversational translation between, data scientists and medical doctors. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, I think Well, just to touch on Joann's point, I think, this is where humans, especially clinicians who are working, can really learn a lot actually about themselves with AI, because you know how to connect the dots. And what we don't have in imaging, for instance, is that we don't really know oftentimes what the ultimate outcome of that patient is. And if we know that, and then we work backwards and connect that to the images, I think that's when we really make breakthroughs in terms of diagnosis. And I'm convinced that we actually, I'm a cardiologist, I'm convinced I'm going to learn new things I had not learned about from a textbook by knowing the outcome of patients in terms of diagnosis or eventual outcome. So I think, we need to really marry the clinician with the technology. And I think coming back to Lindsey's point about, I actually had a public debate with an AI expert. I said something a little bit contentious. I said, I think we're gonna need less data scientists in the future, not less radiologists. Because I think what happens, and when you have a technology that's fairly robust for images, and again, we're just focused on images, I think decision support is totally in a different category in terms of level of complexity and difficulty. I think it's going to make that job more interesting and more dynamic. And in fact, last year, I think more people applied for radiology residency than ever before. So I think there is a trend to look at radiology as sort of an up and coming field in terms of adopting, really, really cool technology to help with your job. So we'll see what happens, 5 years from now. But I think instead of replacing radiologists and cardiologists, I think it's going to make their jobs more meaningful and more productive, because you can take away a lot of the burden of reading normal studies up to the point that you like. Some cardiologists and radiologists actually like to read normal studies. We don't have to take that away, but we can really relieve a lot of the burden in the field right now. And the volume of imaging, Lindsey, is going up exponentially. So it's going to be a tremendous demand for software to help at least with the normal images, so that we're not burdened with them all the time. I should not be spending 90% of my EKG reading time reading normal EKGs. I should be doing other things to really upscale my level of, the job should be upscaled to the point of my level of training.
Yeah,
Lindsey, if you don't mind, I'd like to follow up on both, some of the points. I think the example both Anthony and Joann gave a really great example in my mind of having an augmentation to the capability of the clinician. So I sort of want to support that. But I want to reemphasize one point that Anthony mentioned, which is if we know the end result outcome of the patients and can connect the dot back to that images, whether it's, mammogram or CT scan or EKG, then, there's a lot. And I 110% agree that we will learn new thing about science that we don't know, or medicine, I should say. We learn new thing about medicine that we don't know today. But coming from, 20 years of bench academic research, I want to say that we have to keep in mind pattern is not causations. So just because we can connect the dot and show relationship, we have to be, in medicine, unlike in finance and e-commerce and other aspects, we have to constrain ourselves and discipline ourselves to think of that as a hypothesis and not a conclusion. And that's really hard to do. I mean, it's we all can see pattern and we like to react to them in everyday life, and that works in most aspects of our life. But in medicine, I think it's necessary for us to say that is a hypothesis. We still need to prove causations and understand when that is applicable, because generally there's nothing that's applicable to every patient under the sun. And that's a difficult self-discipline as a community, as a profession, and as an individual practicing physician. We all have to be able to do that. And I think that comes back to the hype in the press. I think that's another aspect that I think not just forecasting its ability is sort of simplifying the overplaying that the data pattern itself will tell us all. And I happen to disagree with that.
Well, and there's reasons for that too, right? I mean, one of the topics that came up multiple times in the Slack channel prior to this panel discussion was people want to talk about ethics and bias in AI. And I think that in particular, and I think Dr. Chang, you said it, right? Crap in is crap out. So at a certain point, right? Like,
I don't think I said that, but
well, I think
the principle is correct. Yeah,
yes, that it's ultimately,
we don't curate the data well enough, and that's why we sometimes blame the accuracy of the machine or whatever. But we don't. There's a lot of work to be done with curating the data and accurately labeling the data, and have data, as Lynda and I mentioned, with a final outcome, which we don't have the patience for sometimes. So again, I think we learn a lot of ourselves, and before we blame things, I think we should be a partner in terms of the gain sharing and the risk sharing aspects of all of this. We're just as responsible as the AI if we're part of the AI. So.
Yeah, and there's this one great data point that I didn't come up with, and I think it came from some presentation from the NIH, and which is showing, and this is with the assumption, as Anthony said, that you have to, assuming all the data is 110% accurate in terms of being curated and cleansed and defined carefully. And it was a 96.96 correlation between, death by strangulation, by hanging bed sheets, and correlation of that to eating a certain type of cheese. And I think that's, I think it's a cute example, and it intended to just remind us the dangers of taking it at face value. Any kind of relationship, no matter how strong, the scientific method needs to be applied. And there's the scientific that guides every one of our experiments in medicine that turn an observation into an evidence need to be applied, whether it's driven by a single anecdotal observation or a large pattern we see in a big data set. I think that's really the rigor that I think we need to apply, whether it's AI or whether it's just developing a biomarker for the drug.
Lindsey, I also see AI to help raise everyone's game. The trainees game that may not be ready for taking care of very complex patients, the seasoned clinician who's been on call for 2 nights and is tired and fatigued. So we often don't talk about that. We talk about the accuracy on one end, but I see this as something that hopefully will raise everyone's game and protect clinicians from making a really, really bad judgment or at least question that particular decision or interpretation of an image. So I see that as a potential bigger dividend than finding a cure for a certain cancer, which hopefully it will be able to do for us. But I see there's a leveling of the playing field for patient care that hopefully will improve overall outcome. I think that's really, really important.
And Anthony, would you agree that I agree with you? And I think you may have pointed earlier, there's a difference between decision support and imaging diagnosis, right? And in my view, what you described there is really where the augmentation comes in helping clinicians make data-driven decisions with decision support, so that we make the junior faculty be as experienced as the person who's been in practice for 20 years, or nurses and nurse practitioners. I think everybody could use their augmentations, and I think of that as the role of AI in decision support. And I do think that there's not enough focus on that, because I think that has immediately implication and impact on patient care. Yeah,
and also talk about the ethics of not using a basic AI tool that can help clinicians. This COVID pandemic, if we had data and IT infrastructure ready for AI, I think we would have had significant less number of deaths, but we just weren't ready. And I think we often talk about ethics and bias in AI, but I also want to counter. I'm not a defender of the AI, but I'm just saying, to be fair and symmetric, we should think about how some basic AI tools that most of us can agree on should be at least available are not being deployed, and the potential downside of that. And Joann's absolutely right. The clinicians, I know as a pediatric cardiologist, we had a similar study looking at accuracy. a third of us could not make a basic diagnosis on EKG, a third on the average. And but we talk about 0.97 on the computer side. So we have to be a little bit symmetric in our expectation and discussion about ethics, bias, and accuracy.
I think also the role, I mean, Isabel just commented in the Slack, right? It's not only about diagnosing, but aftercare, where you can make a great difference, right, in life years and quality of life for the patient. So it's also understanding the application of how we're using it. Or as Dr. Chin mentioned, right, in COVID, had we had AI to synthesize all of the data, right, the infrastructure to synthesize all of the data very quickly, mass amounts of data, rather than the communication that it required and the time that it required, that we could have seen drastic impact to outcomes there. I think a huge undertaking.
I felt like about, I'm a reviewer for a lot of papers on AI, and I felt like half of the effort in AI went into chest X-ray and CT diagnosis of COVID. We did not need hundreds of papers in that area. I mean, most clinicians can diagnose COVID during the pandemic without a chest X-ray even. But everything else was sort of left open. And I saw so many great projects that could have been done that would have saved lives. And unfortunately, there was no, the clinicians were too busy for sure. But even something like using machine learning for testing, I think really improved the flow, the throughput for testing, and no one was really focused on those areas, and that really made a big difference, right? So again, it's a unfortunate demonstration of the distance between the people that are modeling in academic institutions and people who are on the ground in emergency room taking care of these patients.
Yeah, and I know you've really taken on that, role of translator between the two. What do you see personally in terms of what we can take in terms of tangible steps to move that forward? What can we do to move that ball?
I'm working hard on efforts to have democratized education for healthcare workers from the medical student up. And we have the ABIM, which is the American Board of AI Medicine, that any person can take. It's a 2-day review course leading to a certification to really increase the level of understanding. Again, I speak just enough French to get around Paris comfortably, but in an in-depth philosophical discussion about something, I'm going to be struggling. And I just like clinicians to have a conversational AI available for them so that they can actually see the benefits and the limitations of AI. And I think that data scientists also need to do the reverse, which is spend some time with doctors in the clinic and the hospital so that they don't think the medical image and AI is the only thing that's going to make a difference. There's so many other areas, even the processes in the hospitals need a major improvement with AI tools that are available now. So I think there's so much that can be done. But on the other hand, we have a tough period coming up with AI medicine because the lowest hanging fruits are all kind of taken with medical images, but the decision support, the cognitive aspects of being a doctor is going to be the much harder part. But I think we'll slowly make progress in the long term. So we have to have the long-term vision that this is going to be a really good resource. It's a once in a generation resource that we should not sort of just say it's technology and be a naysayer. We should try to adopt it as best as we can for the long-term vision of improving things for the next generation of clinicians.
And I think education is so important. There was 34 years ago, there were the MD PhD program, right? The need to train physicians who understand science and have scientists who understand medicine. And, I would be, even I don't have the PhD, but I put myself in, without having gone through a PhD program, I'm sort of more like an MD PhD than just an MD. And so maybe you will never be the expert, physician that you are, but we all need translators. And right now in the AI space, we need translator like Anthony who can speak both languages. And then we need, the physician to be education and data competent. I guess that's a word. Like they have to be data competent. They need to know what data tells them and not tell them. They need to be trained to appreciate correlation means what. and statistic, p-value means what. And, I think that's the education piece. And I think starting with med school or earlier even, but the question that I, put back to Anthony, I know he's with AI Med, he's doing this, is we also have to support the current generations of physician practice. We can't wait for the next generation.
Well, that's what it's
just not just the med students, right?
Yeah, the ABAIM is totally designed for the busy clinician.
Right.
We even schedule it sometimes over a weekend just so that it doesn't interrupt their workflow during the week. So, and we've had really amazing responses to that. And it's kind of like a 2-day crash course in AI and healthcare with both the data science part as well as the clinical part, because we balance it just right. So you could be a data scientist coming in and have a good feel for what to do in healthcare. We wanted to maintain that balance just like the book. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I never forgot about the clinicians, especially the senior.
I know you did, but I just want to bring this up.
Yeah, especially the senior clinicians now are feeling more and more pressure from the C-suite to have some understanding of this and figure out what to do with this. So the majority of C-suite executives have pretty much decided to invest in AI, whatever it is. Some of them can't even define what it is, but they really think, it's such an important part of the future. And to start thinking about an AI strategy for your company or your organization is so key right now. It's like the internet when it first came, right? People didn't exactly know what it was, but they kind of sense that that's the future. I think the same can go for AI. But I do think that while medicine is an art, ignoring or thinking that data science is not just as important is a mistake. I think that too many senior clinicians are just practicing without consistency or without accurate data. And I think we need to really raise everyone's game, as I said, in practicing medicine and hold each other accountable. But we need help. Clinicians are swamped, they're busy, they're more busy than ever before. The morale is at its lowest point. But the encouraging thing I always find is I have 100 summer interns with me every summer to uplift me because they are the next generation of clinicians. And there are more students have applied for medical schools than ever before, partly because of the pandemic, being inspired by that. But we really are responsible for leaving an incredible platform for them because their lives as clinicians are going to be very, very difficult.
And I know we have a topic that Lindsey, you want to bring to, which is equity, and I'm just going to jump in. I want to reemphasize a point that I think it was brought up earlier. Anthony, you call it raising the game. I think that's actually part of the ethical responsibility. How can we accept that just because they're not machine, they're human expert, but yet they miss a diagnosis, or more likely, actually, is more likely they didn't appreciate or didn't know that there's a new therapy that could be life-saving versus, curative versus non, or they miss a known toxicity that's unique to that novel therapy because they have never seen it before. And it's fair, if you've never seen it, you wouldn't think of it, but someone else has seen it. So how do we take medicine from this tribal knowledge-based practice to actually a science? That means if someone knows something somewhere else, the next physician who's seeing that patient in a different part of the world or country or organization should know about it and should be able to apply that upon the care. And that is not, in my mind, AI in the sense of replacing physician is artificial machine intelligence. I think that is a tool, whatever you want to label it, that is supposed to augment the quality of care that we deliver to our patients. And that is an obligation. Once that's available, then it's not good enough to say, I wasn't trained in that. I don't believe in machine. I don't like AI, and therefore I don't want to use it. And I think we do need that level of standard applied to medicine. So it's not just up to you to up your game. It is your obligation to up your game. It is our obligation to deliver best practice. And I think that's where AI has a huge role to play. I don't see a lot of that. Much of emphasis on diagnostic based on pattern recognition, machine learning pattern in radiology and pathology, all very important. You got to get the right diagnosis before you start treating them. But there's so much room for us to up the game and make sure that the best practices apply when we take care of patient on therapy. And I think that's the decision support part that I would love to see more of. And that to me, we can bring that into the conversation of equity, because equity isn't just about social determinants of health.
Yeah, let me follow up on that point, Lynda. It's really important. In addition to AI tools to help with diagnostic accuracy and imaging, there are many tools that are already being used at a population level. UCLA Health identifies high-risk patients, and we send them to our intensivists to take hopefully better care of them. But as has been mentioned, there's a lot of junk in the electronic medical record. And as a busy physician, I don't always click the right codes. I look for something quick because I could otherwise have to spend 30 seconds extra trying to find the right little area to click. And the data are not perfect in the electronic medical records. We have structural racism in our country and also in our healthcare system. And I want to just add a word of sort of a comment that we need to be careful as we move to using big data. There was an article published in 2019 in Science where they found that a big AI tool that was identifying high-risk patients that they then would send more pharmacists and social workers to help them because they were sicker, it was sending much more care to the white patients, even though the Black patients were just as sick. And the reason is that this AI tool was based on charge and money, and more money was spent on the white patients than the Black patients, even though the Black patients were sicker. And so this AI tool, when it was implemented with hundreds of thousands of people, would lead to even worse structural racism. And so, as Lynda says, we need to up our game. We need to be cautious and careful that we don't further inequities as we move forward. And there's some phenomenal tools. And in fact, I agree with Anthony that we could have done much more during the COVID pandemic, sort of the height, but we now may have a long tail from COVID in that I'm seeing a lot of patients with long COVID, the post-acute complications. And the one benefit potentially of COVID is that scientists used to work in silos. They had their own teams, their own data, they didn't share. And I've never seen the amount of sharing and the amount of collaboration that really has grown from this terrible last year. And so I think that AI will be very helpful going forward with some of the post-acute SARS-CoV-2 complications.
Yeah, I think there's been more work in the last 2 or 3 years, even pre-COVID, on trying to start managing complex patients, especially in the area of quality improvement and patient safety. I didn't see that earlier, around 2010 to 2015, but I think people are slowly realizing that these are useful tools if it's used correctly. Again, I think some of the biases, I think we're going to learn about ourselves, and even if it's unintentional bias, as in I think some cases, I think we're going to learn that maybe we didn't get it right and we need to correct it. There's even machine learning tools that are available to look for these biases based on the distribution, population, and area and everything. So I think those are all good starts. And just like Alan Turing said, we can't always rely on humans to solve problems that machines can solve. So I think it's going to be that synergy between clinicians with wisdom and then machines with a higher ability for computational math and statistics to really, I think, find a special synergy that I think we'll achieve, this decade. I'm very optimistic about that. I think more and more people are realizing this is a partnership. This is not seasoned clinicians denying that this is an up and coming resource that's going to be valuable. And it's also not AI experts sort of hyping the technology. I think we're going to be jig-jagging our way up this coming decade in terms of advances and then pauses to just see what we're doing. And I think that's healthy for us.
And I think the other way to think about that is I am not old enough, but I imagine at one point physician, all they had is a stethoscope and nothing else. And at some point they learn that there are imaging, chest X-ray, and then there's CT, and then there's PET, there's EKG, and they come. But I'm sure when they first arrive, there is this sort of push and pull between the human expert and the technology, but they become one. And I think at the end of the day, well, I don't know, Anthony, I think hopefully in not too long future, we don't talk about AI medicine. AI is just part of medicine, just like we don't question whether you should have a hospital and whether you should have chest X-ray or not, or EKG machine. It is just part of the tool.
That's funny because that's how I answer the question, because I talk about the space program a lot and draw analogies to AI medicine. And someone said, what do you think is the lunar landing moment for AI in healthcare? Is it a killer app? Or actually, Matt Lundgren just asked me this last week at Stanford. And I said, it's not going to be a killer app. It's going to be everything. It's going to be the moment we realize that we don't emphasize AI in medicine anymore, because that's standard of care and that's just embedded in a lot of the aspects that we really need help in. So that's our lunar landing moment. It's going to come, I think, in a decade or two. It's not going to come this year or next year.
Right. But I think in that, along with that way, I think I want to come back to this point about equity. I think having access to this tool is a requirement to deliver equitable care. Because imagine that you can, you're in a community where you have no access to CT machine, and what kind of care can you actually deliver, comparable quality care as if you are at a place with such diagnostic tool. And I think that's where AI will get us to. But we have to, on the way there, we have to think about how to make sure that the clinician side is delivering the equitable care. And I bring this back because I know there's a lot of conversation for all the right reasons that we talk about equity, particularly after last year, even though it's not new in any sense, but it's certainly being brought up to the top. And the focus, I think we do not focus enough. It should be at least symmetrical about parameter or factors that come from the clinicians in terms of resulting in inequity in care. And that's, I know we touch on it, and I just want to bring it out. I think it is the unconscious bias, lack of information, lack of knowledge in a clinician who may be very comfortable doing what they do and have done for decades. That we need to look at that as really driving and contributing to inequity. And in some way is structure, because the rural community, underserved community have fewer clinicians, less resource, and therefore they have less access, right? As a result, the patient, even though they may be able to get an appointment and see an oncologist, that's my area of expertise, that oncologist may not be up to date in terms of the diagnostic test, the latest targeted therapy, and the way to manage immunotherapy. All of that contribute to inequity. And I think we have to hold the clinician responsible as well, not just on the social determinant side.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lynda's points, and let me follow up on Anthony's and John's points as well in terms of the ethical questions. So if you talk about the technology and the technical solutions on their own, they are objective, or they could be objective. What's the bigger issue is the data which we are working with, and there is a huge amount of legacy data, of course, which we have from the previous decades and centuries, and now we are trying to work with that legacy data. So even from the technology perspective, the biggest problem is not how to make faster and even better solutions, but more how to filter out the data, how to clean the data, and we should focus more on that. And this is where the problem is coming, because it's not a purely technical or technology question, and it's not a purely medical question, because maybe that data is accurate from some point of view, or some perspective, but not from that perspective where we make the next steps with that. So this is where the point which is mentioned by Anthony is coming in. The collaboration between the different areas to have better data and cleaner data as a next important step or important phase, and based on that, reaching valuable results is easier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's true. And obviously, as we could probably go on for much, much longer on this topic, but we are at time now. So to Dr. Chang's point, we clearly have not hit our lunar landing moment, as this is just such a rich and deep topic to continue discussion on. But I'd like to thank all of our wonderful panelists for this phenomenal discussion. You guys brought just so much to the table around this topic, and I really appreciate it. So just to wrap up, I'd like to thank you for another great Rapid Conference panel discussion and for 10 amazing Rapid Conference events. From next month, our live events will be member exclusive networking events, focusing on connecting the European and US health tech spaces. So if you are a HealthTech Networking Club member, please join us next month on June 24th for our revamped event format. And if you are not yet a member, or if you'd like more information on the HealthTech Networking Club, please head to the Bene Studio website and follow Bene Studio on social media. We're now going into a 3-minute networking break to talk to each other on Slack. And once we return, Sandra Miller will be your moderator for the HealthTech Startup Award session. Networking Club members, please join me on Slack for more networking and a chance to comment on the topic of the month. The link is in the Zoom chat, and to everyone watching the live stream, stay online and we'll be back shortly.
Yeah, thank you for the great discussion.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome back. That was really a fabulous discussion on healthcare and AI. Really great interactions and lots of different rich perspectives brought to the table. Welcome to the HealthTech Startup Award portion of our May HealthTech Rapid Conference event. And as you may know, this event is hosted by the HealthTech Networking Club. My name is Sandra Miller, and I'm CEO of Runway Innovation Hub. We're located in San Francisco. Runway is an innovation company accelerating the success of global innovators and entrepreneurs. We do this by helping global enterprises through results-focused innovation consulting, and we power the growth of startups through acceleration programs, mentorship, and flexible workspace services. I will be your moderator for this HealthTech Startup Award session, and I want to let you know that this is being recorded. And there's a tremendous amount of viewership of these recorded events. So startups get the opportunities to both get exposure live with us today, but they also, these videos have garnered about 10,000 views on YouTube and Facebook. So really nice exposure for everyone who's participating today. We have a tremendous panel of judges to help us provide feedback to the startups who will be pitching today. Our judges today include Dr. Gary Goldman, founder and CEO of the Global Health Impact Network, Thomas Miller, senior counsel at Nixon Gwilt Law, and Chris Saxman, who's a board member at Nimble Science, and Balint Bene, founder and CEO of Bene Studio. I'm going to ask each of the judges to just give a very brief introduction before we move on to the startups. So let's start with you, Tommy. Can you just briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thank you, Sandra. My name is Tommy Miller. As Sandra mentioned, I am senior counsel with Nixon Gwilt Law. We are a healthcare innovation firm focusing on companies that are innovating in digital tech, digital health, med tech, life science, and FDA regulated products. I lead our FDA practice, focusing on a lot of startups in the medical device and digital therapeutics area, as well as some clinical and commercialized pharmaceutical companies.
Great, thank you very much. Our next judge is Dr. Gary Goldman. Gary?
Good morning. Thanks, Sandy. So Gary Goldman, 35 years in healthcare, dentist, physician, serial entrepreneur, informaticist, and now CEO of Global Health Impact Network and Global Health Impact Fund. We are a clinician funded, founded, and driven network of clinicians focused on creating an environment for the active participation of clinicians in the evolving digital health revolution. And we're doing this through democratizing the investment process and then promoting active collaboration and communication around innovation in healthcare.
Thank you, Gary. Our next judge is Chris Saxman. Chris?
Good morning. I have over 30 years of experience in entrepreneurship, having started or been part of the early teams in 3 different startups, as well as helping to invest in companies through New York Angels and one of AIG's private equity groups. Most recently, I've been focused on healthcare. Over the last 8 years, I helped to build what is now one of the largest telemedicine companies in the country, SiriusMD, and have served on the boards of a couple of other digital health companies and help invest a small portfolio through through the Rockies Venture Fund. So looking forward to getting to meet all of you.
Terrific. Thank you, Chris. And Balint, our next and final judge.
My name is Balint Bene, CEO of Bene Studio, and today I would like to share the experiences which I had with 100 plus successful projects, downsides, and best practices. And this event is about promoting the new startups, your work, to share the knowledge and to help as much as possible. And also, I'm sure that I will learn a lot from you as well today.
Thank you, Balint. All right, we have 4 startups who will be pitching to us today. They are UpLife with Isabel Rotman, who's co-founder of UpLife, and Marius Kramer, co-founder of, I think that's pronounced Havy, but Marius will tell us when he gives his presentation. We have Nicholas Egling, who is partner and manager at eCovery. And we have Dr. Rahman Mohammed, who's founder of VivoDoc. One of the things that's pretty fun today is that we have startups from UpLife is from Zurich, Switzerland. Havy is from Havy, and eCovery are both from Germany, and VivoDoc is from Dallas. So it's fun to see some nice geographic diversity in the mix there. That's always terrific. All right, so here's how today's session will run. Each startup will have 4 minutes for their pitch. After the 4-minute pitch, I will ask the judges to briefly ask any questions to the startup and give any feedback. After this Q&A, the judges will score the startup pitch on a scale of 1 to 5, with a score of 5 being the highest. And judges, if you haven't done this before with me, we use a very fancy system where I ask you literally just to hold up your fingers with your score. And then at the end of today's session, the startup with the highest score will be announced as the HealthTech Startup of May. The winning startup will receive a product acceleration service with Bene Studio, and that will allow you to enhance the development of your product. That's something you get for free. That's not a sales pitch. That's just you get it, okay? And then also the winning startup, again, no sales pitch as part of this, can have a one-on-one coaching session to sort of really dig into either your company or your pitch. We're all always trying to improve our own presentations, courtesy of Runway. And all startups participating in today's session are eligible for a free product booth session with Bene Studio. So everybody gets some fun. All right, good stuff. And remember, for those of you watching, please do use the Slack channel for feedback for the startups, because they would love to have feedback, even your praise, and also on Slack would be great. So you can also share your perspective with the judges, and your feedback could be highlighted in the HealthTech Startup Award summary. So let's get started with our first pitch, which is Isabel Rotman from Zurich with UpLife. Isabel, is it Rotman or Hoffman?
It's a typo, it's Rotman, but I started listening to both today.
Okay. So we are saying your name correctly. It's Rotman.
Totally.
Okay. I would hate if we got your last name
thanks.
All right. So I have my very fancy timer here. Let me just get that ready.
Cool. Let's start sharing, maybe?
Yeah, we'd like to see your slides. We can hear you well. You may want to just make sure you're speaking at that level, or maybe even a little louder.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Great. And we're ready to go when you are, Isabel.
Great. Let's go. Yes, hello again. My name is, as you heard, Isabel Rottmann. I'm founder and CEO of Uplife.io. We are a Switzerland-based company that enables insurers, but also large corporates and medical service providers to create complex health ecosystem that help patients manage their own health better and being more informed. So we are quite an interdisciplinary team of data scientists, engineers, medical doctors, and behavioral scientists. And our primary goal is to solve this challenge. These are just the numbers for Europe, but the US and Canadian numbers look the same. We spend over 10% of our salaries on diseases that are no fun to consume, but it's a lot of our budget. And Uplife is covering with its lifestyle interventions more than half of the current diseases that sum up to our health total. Why did it take so long to solve this challenge? We have the hypothesis that it's two things. First of all, we already mentioned, the name tells us a lot. It's complex care. It's not just to take a pill and my problem is solved. I will have to address my behaviors, and behavior is really difficult to change, has a lot of interdependencies. And secondly, I need a whole health ecosystem to work with. It's not something you can do in a silo. It's not a simple app. It's not a single doctor visit that can fix this problem. So how did we configure our solution? It's a B2B2C solution. So you have a front end for the end user, the patient, and you have a back end that makes the license takers in our SaaS model more informed. Exactly, but let's see. Oh, let's start on the left. That's the client intervention. Let's assume you're a medical doctor, you manage a chain of hospitals, and you want to improve the outcome or the life expectancy of your chronically ill patients. For example, let's take cardiovascular diseases. In order to do that, we all know you should eat healthier, maybe a DASH diet, you should exercise more, and you should monitor key biomarkers like blood pressure, resting pulse on a regular basis. And even more, you should know what these numbers mean. And you should be able to discern slight changes to realize that's a negative or positive trend. And I might talk to my doctor earlier than actually planned. That's what the app does. It leads you through, guides you through this interface. Oh, then apologies. Then the second dimension comes in, and that's, yeah, you guessed it, that's where AI is hiding. All the entries, the meal intakes, the exercise, and the biomarkers, including symptoms, go through pattern recognition, machine learning modules that detect your current health trend. And once the health trend is we are concerned about it, we forward you, and that's exactly where we discussed about supporting technology. We support you to a telemedical next instance where you get support and more refined analysis about your problem. And then it gets really interesting. Apologies for the presentation, it does funny things. Then it gets really interesting because in the center, in the backend, you see the data of your users. So you see the real life problems of the users of your health app. You see what health risks are rising, and you see what symptoms users need to be tackled next. And in a very agile way, you can integrate an intervention supporting services right for the next day.
So Isabel, you are out of time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, good. I'm done.
So I'm going to let you just say a line or two to wrap up.
Okay, yeah, fair. Sorry.
Your ask.
Okay, basically what we're asking for, we're looking for POC candidates. We need proof of concepts outside of Europe. We're always interested in connections, and we will be doing another round of 1.5 million towards the end of the year. Currently, we're management owned.
Terrific. All right. So judges, lots of opportunities for questions here. So go ahead, Balint.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Really exciting and important topic. What I'm curious about is the competitors and what's your differentiator compared to them.
Yeah, it's the time to market and the speed. I mean, currently we see a lot of apps in that area for a good reason. The key differentiating factor is that we enable our partners, so insurers and medical service providers, to create really agile health programs. So I see live data evolving right in the back that is fully anonymized, but that tells me what my population needs next, because currently it's guessing what I might think funny, what my insured or my employees might need to have a better health. Mm-hmm. We help users not only seeing what they need, but also have a nice backend where you integrate an intervention or additional service offerings and target it exactly only to the risk patients within just 2 hours.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions or feedback? Go ahead, Tommy. And then Chris.
Yeah, so thank you, Isabel. I see a lot of apps developing over here in the US that kind of coordinate the health inputs. And so I guess for me, my question is going to be, are you looking for this to be something that's more of a concierge model where people are paying out of pocket, or is the revenue stream really kind of tied into payers, both either, in the EU system where it's single payer, or are you looking for payers over here in the US to pick this up as well?
No, our clients, it's a SAS model where insurers and medical service providers and also retailers started in the medical sector, started buying licenses from us just to gain time to market and profit basically from the big data lake that we have to make smarter health programs and bring them faster to the market.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And then we'll move on to scoring this. Yeah, Chris, there you go.
Sorry, I was my cursor was on the wrong screen there for unmuting purposes. Great presentation. Appreciate it. My question is, do you see this as something targeted towards a specific type or persona of customer? And by customer, I mean the actual patient. Or is it something that you plan to target all people?
Yeah, no.
Different offerings.
We have quite strong data on people at the early stage of metabolic syndrome and also with beginning diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. It's not, where does it end the target group? It's where you get super complex multimorbidity and also a certain age that doesn't make you super digitally fine.
Okay, and so that data is that you have, that data set that you have is the core. It sounds like that's really the core of what you're offering here, is where, as opposed to some of the things that wrap around it.
Yeah, well, it's we can really prove it has a direct impact on the patients, and that's basically what drives the business models of our clients.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Great job, Isabel. And now we turn to our judges to ask them to score. And so we have 3 4s and a 3. All right. Thank you, judges.
Thank you.
Okay. And next up, we have Marius Kramer with Havy. Am I saying your company right? Marius, can we hear you?
Yeah, I had the same problem as Chris had with the screen. Actually, it's called Hive.
But
at this point, it seems to be so natural to say Havy that we are actually thinking about changing it, because it's just like anyone says Havy, so why not change it if it's so natural for people?
Okay, so I'm ready to go with the timer. So whenever you're
Amazing.
ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, go.
So yeah, hi again. My name is Marius, and I want to talk about pain today, and especially a way for people to deal with their pain at home. So we as humans have kind of accepted that we have to deal with some pain in our lives. So at some point, the knee is hurting, the back is hurting, and there seems to be no structural damage. There's no obvious reason for the pain to be there. So people just have to accept it at some point or take a pill against it. There is actually a solution against these kinds of pains and these chronic pains especially, which is called neurocentric training. It's a pretty complex way of training, basically targeting the nervous system and the brain especially, which we can, I think, go into more detail in the questions better. And the problem on this approach is that it is really not accessible right now. In the whole world, there are around 1,000 trainers who actually can do this training. And being so few trainers, you can actually guess how the pricing is. So it's very, very expensive and it is very inaccessible for people. So what we are doing with Hive or HeyV, whatever you want to say and you prefer, is we're trying to make this neurocentric training accessible. We are building an app, basically web and mobile based, which is data driven and then suggests these neurocentric training for people. We are there on we are focused on a very data-driven, as I said, and artificial intelligence approach there, because you can imagine we have like 20 to 30 different systems that are involved in movement and in pain. And what neurocentric training does is it basically identifies the weakest system in this chain and on what side. So basically brainstem, for example, on the right side, we have to train first. And that leads us to like 10 to 20 million different profiles, neurocentric profiles that we are building that the user can get. And based on those profiles, we then suggest neurodrills. Basically, if your right brainstem is lacking a bit, you can do movement on the left side to activate that. And that basically reduces stress in your nervous system. And by reducing the stress, we also reduce pain and we improve movement. We are very B2C focused right now. So we are basically building an app that the end user can use at home and has to pay for itself. We are looking into different models there, B2B2C, talking to insurance companies and stuff like that. But currently we are very focused on the B2C model and on the end user. We are, I think, a bit earlier than the other startups here today. We are in our third alpha version right now. We tested and validated the concept using like now 75 to 80 users. And the algorithm, which is currently very, very basic, as we are only testing 2 systems, already has a 90% hit rate, meaning we find a drill immediately that helps people immediately. So they see instant improvements. We validated the payment or like the willingness to pay from people, from the users. And we already gathered a lot of data, which we are currently building up on. Hive is me, Marius, as I said, and my co-founder Hadi is a medical doctor. And basically for 6 years now, he is doing this neurocentric training, and he applied it with like a lot of clients in his practice, in his like work. And now we are basically trying to bring his brain and whatever he does into the app, basically that everyone can use it. As I said, we are currently in alpha version and we are looking to raise our pre-seed right now. We're making good progress, but we are still open to take tickets starting at 50K there to fund the pre-seed. And we are in parallel building up the team right now and also looking into different markets, as I said before, in the networking. Okay, I'm going to stop. I think that was your alarm for me.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have a final ask that you want to mention?
Yeah, basically, the last sentence I wanted to finish was maybe that we are looking to go into countries outside of Germany, because Germany might actually not be the best market to start. And like there are other European countries which are really interesting. So any contact there would be really helpful. And of course, the pre-seed round is something we are looking to fill as fast as possible.
Of course. There we go. Okay, judges, any questions? Gary.
Hi, interesting presentation, thank you. So I'm an anesthesiologist and I definitely do a little bit of pain management over the years. So I mean, I listened to the presentation. I was also on there's not much on the web, but on the website. I'd like to get a better understanding of what the actual process is to go through this training, because I don't have a good feel for that from the presentation.
Yeah, basically, normally what we would do in the personal training is actually the same that the app does. So the first step is that we ask some questions, of course. For example, do you have pain on one side only, or like mainly on one side, stuff like that. And then we do some very basic movement tests. For example, do you have trouble blinking your eyes? Like which side is harder for you to blink? And then do you have trouble standing on one leg? Which side is harder? And then we do some more tests, like really easy stuff. And those tests are currently driven towards your brainstem, basically, and cerebellum, testing those two systems. And then we use those tests to validate. Like the first questions already give us a good indication, and then we validate using the tests. And then the next step is that we introduce something that is called assessment, or assess and reassess process, which is basically just before you do one of these neuro drills, like the actual exercise for neurocentric training, you just assess your movement. You like, how good does my shoulder move? How far can I do toe touch or something like that? You do the drill then, and then you assess again, like, did something change here? Did something change there? And that actually allows us to see, is a drill effective for someone, and then implement it into their training routine.
Okay, we have time for just one more question.
Sorry.
I will ask a question. So, Marius, how do patients sort of become aware of this? How do they know that they need neurocentric training, or they would benefit from that?
Yeah, basically what we realized right now is that people who are in pain that has not been solved yet. So they are in pain and they tried some stuff. Basically, that is our key customer right now. And then, of course, we go advertising, and when we do partnerships, like, for example, that's where the B2B2C model comes in. We are working with physical therapists and stuff like that to basically add on their services.
Okay, great. So one piece of feedback I would encourage you to add in is have some more specificity around customer acquisition, because that is a little fuzzy right now. You're early. Sure. You're early, but I think that'll help you. All right, judges. Let's go ahead and give this nice presentation a score. So what do we have for Hive? We have a 2, and we have 3 4s. All right, thank you. Very nice. So we have a score of 14 there. Next up, thank you very much, Marius. Next up, we have Nicholas Eggerling with eCovery. Nicholas, can you put your slides up? We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you see my screen? Is that fine?
Now we can. Yes.
Thanks.
And so I'm ready to go whenever you are.
Cool. Yes, I'm ready. Thank you again for having us tonight, this evening, or wherever you are sitting. And thank you again, Marius, as well. Pain was a good keyword. So I want to share a story with you. Maybe some of you can relate to this very moment of pain when you notice a sharp pain in your bone, and you notice immediately that something went completely wrong, and you have injured yourself. In this very moment, you feel frustrated, you feel pain, and you know that there will come a time of long rehabilitation in front of you, and you want to get back as quick as possible to a normal standard of mobility, of course. But here you have the first problem, because in Germany, at least in the German market, it takes 21 days until you, as a patient, get your first appointment to start your rehabilitation process with a physiotherapist. And this is not your only problem, since once you are in a physiotherapeutic treatment, you have like maybe 1 to 2 treatments a week. And everything that happens beside these treatments is in a black box. So nobody knows what happens. Neither your physiotherapist knows how regularly and how correct you exercise, or nor you know as a patient if you do the exercise right or wrong, and if you do the right amounts of exercises. So this is quite a huge problem, and these numbers reflect the size of it and of the market. Only in lower and upper back, we have 30 million diagnoses a year. With hips, it's 2.4 million diagnoses, and with knees, it's 4.3 million. It's resulting in a total market demand on these diagnoses of 20 million diagnoses. So obviously, we have a big problem here. And I guess, and I'm convinced that we have a big solution as well. So what are we offering as a technology, as a digital therapeutic app that offers therapy, physiotherapy, and the right therapy from the moment of injury until the first day of an appointment. So you can start right away without aggregating your injury because you need to wait for 21 days. Also, we identify which kind of therapy concerning special indication or certain indications provides you with the best treatment for yourself. And in the future, we will implement a sensor system that gives you not only a video feedback, but like real data feedback on your movement if you do your exercise in an appropriate way. So on this mission, a huge team is working day and night, and we're quite diverse, but our main focus is the medical innovation and medical excellence. We have a certain and special psychology department investigating the motivation behind the patient treatment and focusing especially on how to engage the patient every day a little bit better to his or her own rehabilitation. Concluding in a mission and vision that we want to be a platform on the cutting edge of medicine and technology that will enable almost everybody who's able to use a smartphone for a better rehabilitation facility. And up to now, we released, or we certified a couple of days ago 3 medical products in the area of knee, hip, and back diagnoses. We have generated over 40 partners so far that who spread the solution to patients in the end. And our next mission is to create the MVP and finalize the MVP for the sensors and to enhance the patient feedback. Reimbursement is a huge thing, especially in Germany right now. So I'm running out of time and I'm going over this page really quick. This is like only a quick view for our partners for the reimbursement. And right now we are looking for investors, partners, and every kind of stakeholders who want to participate in our journey, who see potential in here and drive progress with us. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm glad for your questions now.
Almost right on time. Great job. Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, judges, questions for your e-covery. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, so great presentation. Actually, I have a lot of experience in this space, so I'm very interested in what you're doing. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the sensor side of what you're doing.
So basically what the sensor does is we have 2, starting from the problem side, right? So we have the patient who has a low amount of, or low level of motivation to exercise and to practice. So therapy adherence is a big problem. But the other side of the problem is that the patient doesn't even know how to practice. And this factor we want to solve by giving the patient a guidance and creating a sensor so the patient can see how to exercise his practice, his therapy properly. So it's actually a movement tracker.
Great. So basically what you're able to do is track engagement and then track progress at the same time. It uses as a feedback mechanism for the patient.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Judges, any other questions or feedback? Go ahead, Chris.
So over the years, I've seen a number of companies, quite a lot of companies that have taken a digital approach to physical therapy, because the problems you mentioned are very similar to what in Germany, what was similar to what we face here in the U.S. How do you guys see yourselves as different from what has come before?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. There are a lot of competitors or startups in the market, in the end reflecting a huge potential as well. But everybody is solving kind of the same problem with a different approach, I guess. And some of them obviously with the same approach. But where we place our USP is especially by concentrating not only on the patient, not only on the physician or on the physiotherapist, and not only on the insurance side. We try to find a fit that works for everybody. So in the end, I think everybody needs a solution in the future that kind of respects every perspective and not neglect a single parts of the patient's rehabilitation chain. So this is our approach. We're identifying on every step, or we try to identify every need in the certain stakeholder group and trying a way to solve it.
Go ahead, Tommy.
I guess my question is going to be, are you looking to be kind of condition agnostic with this, like, or is this tool really geared toward, patients who are recovering from like kind of non-surgical or really post-surgical kind of, conditions?
Yeah, we already have an anamnesis phase in the app, so we kind of check the patient in the beginning and have a kind of diagnosis, but we're not focusing precisely on the period where the healthcare professional, for example, evaluates the depth of the injury, or for example something like this. So we are only focusing on the therapy part and not only especially on the concentration of the indications and what might cause the injury as well in depth.
Okay, Balint, quick question.
Yeah, great presentation, thanks. And what I'm curious about is a bit more information about the business model.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make money, Nicholas?
Sorry, again, I think I had a lag in the connection. You want to ask something about the business model, right?
Yes.
A concrete question, or just like the revenue model or something?
Yes.
The business model.
Yeah, so this is a long story actually, and there are multiple sides. So I think the basic way to describe it is we are a B2B2C. So we are approaching the patients via the providers, healthcare providers, and it's in the beginning a self-payment version. But in the future, like we are now getting in contact with insurance services who are in huge interest to support this solution financially, since they can save a lot of money with it, obviously. And as well, there's the DIGA, like the Digital Health Act. So you can reimburse your solution through the German healthcare system as a certified app. And this is a process we are also approaching in the future.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Judges, please help me with the scores for recovery. So we have a 3. We have 2 4s and 2 3s. All right, thank you very much. I have to do some advanced math here, but I'll work through it. Last but certainly not least, we are happy to bring to our pitch stage, if you will, Dr. Raman Mohabban with VivoDoc, coming from Dallas, I think. So so bring up your slides. Beautiful. And can we hear you?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Let me know when my screen is visible.
Yeah, it's visible, full screen, looks good. Ready to go when you are.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. So my name is Raman Mohammed. I'm an emergency medicine physician, still actively practicing for the last 10 years, co-founder and CEO of this comprehensive healthcare technology platform. We call it as VivoDoc. So basically, VivoDoc is a healthcare technology company where we try to bring in price transparency and ease of scheduling appointment for patients. We equip our healthcare providers, which are physicians and patients, with tools we created using AI and ML to discover the right type of care and drive optimal outcomes for their medical conditions. And we manage the whole patient care journey. The problem we are trying to address here is as there is no easy way to book direct physician appointments with transparent pricing for patients and for providers to increase their productivity and utilize one single platform for all their practice needs. The problem from the patient side is there is a lack of clarity, which is leading to patient frustration, and there are multiple reasons for it. And for the providers, dealing with multiple vendors, overhead cost, maintaining their business is leading to physician burnout. And our solution is simple. It's a web and mobile marketplace where a patient can search and book appointments, and providers can leverage one single platform for all aspects of their practice management. Some of the advantages for both patients and providers: the patient journey starts with a triage or AI-based symptom check. And they can also use AI-based enable search. They can verify their insurance through their app. Telemedicine as well as in-person appointments are possible, both insurance as well as direct pay, and a comprehensive mobile intake management. From the provider perspective, it's a one-stop shop. They can have real-time appointments as we integrate with their existing EMRs to create appointments directly into the calendar. Both leverage insurance as well as direct pay. Each provider will have a dedicated telemedicine platform with real-time vital monitoring. We are coming up with physician-designed new generation EMR integrated with RCM, and we also do SEO and marketing for our providers. Market size and opportunity. Market size in the US is pretty huge. It's like an ocean. Our TAM is $725 billion with a SAM of $74 billion. And what we are expecting in the next 3 years is $119 million, which we call as serviceable obtainable market with VivoDoc. COVID has acted as a catalyst, so more and more number of patients are leaning towards telehealth. The system is promoting it. The few studies say that 70% of the patients, they begin their search provider online. 38% of CAGR growth in telehealth over the next 5 years is expected. And people are getting used to more and more what we call as health shopping. Our business model is simple. We have 3 tiers: silver, gold, and platinum. Our silver is $199 per month, which has everything except EMR and RCM. Our goal adds EMR to it, and the platinum is independent or can be with both gold and silver, which is very reasonably priced based on US market. We have developed some significant partnerships, and we are still in the process of making a few more significant ones. And our target market is both patients who are seeking healthcare services, for primary care providers, specialists, dentists, chiropractors, and nurse practitioners. On the other aspect, we have independent healthcare providers who are, again, physician specialists who we will be onboarding to our platform. Our competition is a few significant names in the US market, especially ZocDoc, Patient Corp, and Sesame Care. But we feel we have significant edge over them, especially with our integrated EMR and RCM and our unique AI-based patient triage, which we will guide them in a timely manner to choose what type of care they need at this point of time.
Raman, you are at time, so if you could wrap up quickly.
Yeah, sure. Based on market outcome, few exit opportunities which we anticipate, and this is our core team. And what we are looking for is $2.5 million to raise post with the $10 million post money evaluation, and we have raised $800K so far from our physician-only investors, and we see some significant traction even before launch.
Great, thank you very much. Nice job. All right. Judges, if you could stop sharing, Raman. Judges, okay. Any questions for VivoDoc? Go ahead, Tommy.
I'd like talk to me about how you're anticipating the price transparency aspect of your software to work especially when you're integrating with insurance.
Right. So we do it 2 ways. One is in scenarios when patients don't have an insurance, So the physician who is onboarded will advertise the cash pay option, which they would be accepting for an appointment. So in that way, there is no surprise billing to the patient after the appointment. The second aspect is when a patient has an insurance, so we will do the eligibility check and provide information about the in-network patient, and also give an approximate copay, right? And as far as the insurance billing that happens during the physician appointments, that's something between the physician and the patient.
So have you built, sorry, just to follow on with that, have you built those back-end networks with the insurance, kind of like with the insurance providers yet to do those insurance benefit checks?
We have partnered with Change Health and P-Verify, who are providing us with this information.
Okay.
Great. Chris?
What do you, good morning and thank you. What do you see as your strength or ability, given that you're going to be marketing to independent physician practices? Let me rephrase the question. Given that you're marketing to independent physician practices, how do you see your sales operation functioning?
So our strength, we believe that it's like because it's a one-stop shop, running a medical practice is itself very stressful, and they have to deal with multiple vendors, which cost them a lot of money in dealing with them and increase stress. So what we are providing is more convenience and cheaper product.
No, but it wasn't so much what your value prop is, but rather how are you actually going to get to those doctors?
How we are getting to those doctors. So our go-to-market strategy is, again, helping those individual providers to survive in the midst of bigger healthcare system by making them more profitable, by providing them with cheaper options. And the way to approach them is through networking with different physician groups, marketing, which we are actively working right now.
Okay, thank you.
Balint, yeah.
Yes. Thanks. Great presentation. Thank you. And my question is, you mentioned just with the word that you already have traction. Could you share what's the size of this traction?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I describe the traction in two ways. One, because so far the investors who are invested, they are all physicians and they are the end users of our platform. And the second, we have identified a pilot group of close to 200 healthcare providers even before pre-launch. And we have approximately close to 4,000 plus patients or potential patients who have shown interest. And we are, as I said, planning to launch in early next month.
Okay, thanks.
Great. All right, judges. Let's go ahead and give our score for VivoDoc. We have 2 3s and a 2, and I know Gary's score was 4. So we have, okay, so we have 12 for VivoDoc. All right. So thank you, startups, for your pitches, and judges for your feedback and questions. Once again, I'd like to remind you that nobody will walk away empty-handed from today, as all of today's startups are eligible for a free product boost session from Bene Studio. Again, this is not a sort of a sales sort of pitch. It's just something we want to make available for you as it's of interest. And then also the prize for the winning startup will be a one-on-one coaching session with me, courtesy of Runway, and a product boost and product acceleration session with Bene Studio. The winning startup will be highlighted as the HealthTech Startup of May with an exclusive interview published on the HealthTech Networking Club page and across Bene Studio media channels. And we also encourage everyone to give all of the startups who presented today social media love and affection. So the results are in, and we can announce that Isabel Rotman with UpLife actually had the winning pitch today. So congratulations, Isabel. And actually, if you could come off mute, if there's anything you'd like to say or just a final ask to the audience before we wrap.
Thank you, and apologies again for talking too long. That happens rarely. I'm lying.
Great, thank you so much. Congratulations to you. And congratulations to all of the startups who present today. You know, as someone who judges these sorts of events and moderates a fair bit, it truly is our privilege to hear from startups like you, because we learn from every single presentation, and we know you're working hard day in and day out to improve patient care. So thank you to everybody, and thank you again to the great questions and feedback from the judges. So congratulations to our winner, UpLife, and thank you everybody for attending the HealthTech Startup Awards. This is our 10th amazing Rapid Conference event. I can't believe it. What a year. From next month, our live events will be member exclusive networking events focused on connecting the European and US health tech spaces. So if you're a HealthTech Networking Club member, please do join us next month on June 24th for our revamped event format. If you are not yet a member, or if you'd like more information on the HealthTech Networking Club, we're a fun group, trust us. The invite-only networking club that connects startups, investors, healthcare providers, and other key players in the health tech industry. Please do head to the Bene Studio website and follow Bene Studio on social media. So to our club members, please feel free to keep networking with each other on Slack. I wish everybody a great day, and see you next month on June 24th, where we'll be back for more fun. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.